I have 3 daughters, and lately I've been asking myself a question that I'm not sure I have a clean answer to. Would I want them growing up thinking that they need this? And by this, I don't just mean Botox or filler or lasers. I mean all of it. The analyzing, the comparing, the filters, the retaking, the constant awareness of how you look from every angle all the time. I'm a physician. I work in aesthetics. I do these treatments every day. So when I tell you I'm conflicted about this, it means something. And just so that we're clear from the start, I'm not talking about this from the outside. I've stood in front of my own mirror with the same questions that you're probably asking. And the answers don't always come easy, even when you're the one that's holding the syringe. Here's the thing that people in my industry don't love to say out loud. I have watched women with objectively beautiful faces sit in my chair and only see flaws. I love this work. I love subtle artistry. I love watching a patient walk out like herself on the best day. But there's a difference between enjoying beauty and being consumed by it. There's a difference between confidence and obsession. And from the outside, these two things can look almost identical, especially now. Previous generations worried about how they looked in person. This generation now worries about how they look in photos, on video, under fluorescent lighting, on FaceTime, on Instagram stories, next to filtered versions of strangers are online, and in person too. I sit right in the middle of all of it. I hear the insecurities. I hear what women say about themselves when they think no one understands it. And then I go home to my girls. And one of them will say something so innocent about a photo, about her hair, about wanting to look pretty. And it stops me because I realize how early girls start learning that they're being looked at, how early they start evaluating themselves from the outside. So the real question I keep coming back to isn't, is Botox good or is filler good or bad? It's something deeper. What relationship do we want women to have with their faces? That's what this episode is about. Nobody sat me down as a little girl and told me that my appearance mattered. I just learned by watching my mother get ready, watching my grandmother talk about aging on herself, watching the rituals that women have around mirrors that they don't even know are rituals. I can still picture my mother at her vanity, leaning into the mirror, smoothing the same spot between her eyebrows over and over before she went out anywhere. We used to call it her thinking line. I didn't understand it at the time, why she was always trying to smooth it away, but I saw her do it hundreds of thousands of times. And I just filed it away, stored it away. My sister, who's 14 years older than I am, she was almost an early blueprint of what womanhood looked like. I noticed everything on her, what got complimented, what she felt insecure about, what she fixed before leaving the house. She had this language about getting ready. She would say things like, I just need time to fix and put on my face. And I never registered how strange that phrase actually is, that we put on our face, like the one that underneath it wasn't fully ready to be seen. And here's what I think most people miss. Every generation passes down its own version of pressure. My grandmother's generation, the silent generation, post-World War II, they learned to age quietly. You accepted it, you didn't make a thing of it. My mother's generation, the boomers, got more focused on maintenance, hair color, skin care, weight, presentation. My generation, the elder millennials, entered the era of optimization. Not just looking good, but improving and preventing and correcting. And my daughters, they're growing up inside something that's more intense than any of that, because they're not just seeing beauty standards. They're seeing edited beauty standards. Skin that's without pores, faces without movement, lighting that doesn't exist in nature, symmetry that isn't even human. And after enough exposure, normal starts to look flawed. When I was a kid, you compared yourself to people in magazines, maybe celebrities on TV. But now comparison lives in your pocket 24 hours a day. What worries me as a mother isn't that girls want to feel pretty. That's human. That's honestly normal. What worries me is what's happening underneath it. Girls today aren't just growing up with mirrors. They're growing up with cameras, selfies, with filters, Facetune, apps that smooth and lift and blur and reshape. And when you're exposed to that kind of visual feedback over and over again, you stop just existing. You start studying yourself, adjusting yourself. You start performing. Girls don't just see themselves in mirror anymore. They see themselves as content. And once you become content, you start asking yourself different questions. Is this my good side? Should I retake that? Why does my face look different here? And the scary part is that a lot of it is happening before they even have the emotional maturity to process what they're doing. They just know what looks better, but better compared to what? What they're comparing to themselves isn't real. And that's the shift that I keep coming back to. This generation of girls is learning to evaluate themselves before they've even developed a sense of who they really are. That is a very different starting point. So now the conversation is where it gets usually oversimplified. People want a clean answer. Is Botox good or bad? Is filler empowering or is it harmful? So let me be clear. As someone who has the privilege of performing these treatments, Botox isn't the villain. Filler isn't the villain. The mindset behind why we want them sometimes is, though. I believe in aesthetic medicine. I've seen it done beautifully, responsively, subtly. Patients walk out more rested, more like themselves, and no one can pinpoint what changed in them. That's the version that I believe in. But intention matters more than the treatments. Two women can walk in asking for the same exact thing and be coming from completely different places. One wants to soften something that's been bothering her. She's enhancing. The other feels that she's constantly falling short of some version of perfection that she can't quite reach. She's trying to escape. Those are not the same. So the real question isn't, should you do Botox? It's, why do you want to? Are you enhancing yourself or disappearing from yourself? Because there's a point where aesthetic treatments stop being about refinement and start becoming about erasure. Erasing movement, erasing character, erasing the things that make you look like a person. And I'll be honest, the industry doesn't always help with this. Fear sells more beauty than confidence does. Fear of aging, fear of looking tired, fear of falling behind. Women are told constantly that if they don't intervene early enough, they're losing. And I want to be specific about what I mean by that, because the manipulation is everywhere and most of us just stop noticing it at this point. Look at the language: preventative, before it's too late, your future face. Those are not medical terms. They're marketing terms. Or look at the way that before and after photos get shot. The before is under fluorescent lighting, no makeup, a neutral expression, hair is messy. The after is soft light, full glam, smiling, hair done. That isn't a treatment difference. That's a lighting, makeup, and hair difference. And it's everywhere, on Instagram, on clinic websites, on the social feed of practitioners you think you could trust. There's a whole funnel now built on getting women in their early 20s into chairs for so-called preventative treatments. There is no muscle pattern at 22 to prevent. We're creating patients before there's anything there to treat. And the language sounds responsible. Prevention. Who would argue with prevention? Nobody that I know. Meanwhile, the platforms reward the loudest versions of work. The smoothest, the plumpest, the more dramatic the change, the more it travels. Subtle work doesn't go viral, so the work that gets celebrated and copied is the work that erases the most. That's the loop here. That's how a culture's idea of normal slowly shifts. Not because women changed, because what they see did. So that's where physician-led care matters. There should be a layer of judgment, of restraint. Not just can we do this, but should we do this? The best aesthetic work doesn't make you look different. It makes you look like yourself on your best day. That requires saying no sometimes, doing less sometimes, which isn't always the most profitable approach, but it's the right one. Let me get more specific, because I've talked about intention, about restraint, about saying no, and it would be too easy to leave it abstract. So here are the things that I personally will not do. 1, preventative Botox as a blanket recommendation as a default for every young patient who walks in. I want to be careful here because I do believe in preventative neuromodulator when there is a clinical reason for it. Some women in their 20s already show strong muscle patterning. A deep 11, forehead lines that crease at rest, a glabellar furrow that's already setting in. And in those patients, a small Botox early on can actually stop that pattern from etching into the skin permanently. That is not a sales pitch. That's good medicine. What I won't do is preventative Botox because someone saw it on Instagram or because she's 22 and read that prevention is what responsible women are supposed to do. There has to be a muscle pattern to prevent. Otherwise, we're not preventing anything. We're starting a relationship, and that relationship is what compounds. Once you start, you don't really stop. So the question is never just about today's appointment. It's about the next 20 years. The line I draw isn't against prevention. It's against prevention without an indication. Number 2, stacking filler past the point of believability. This is a point where more filler doesn't make a face look fuller. It makes it look heavier. It makes it look distorted. It makes it look less mobile, less yours. And once you are there, it is a very hard thing to come back from. Filler doesn't always dissolve the way that patients think it does. The tissue changes, the proportions shift. By the time someone realizes they've gone too far, the face that they had is harder to find. 3, treatments before a specific event for someone who has never had them done before. If you walk into my practice 3 weeks before your wedding or a big event asking for filler you have never tried, I am not your doctor for that. You do not need to look different in your photos. You need to feel held, and those are two very different needs. One I can help with, the other is not what this work is for. 4, the fix what the last person did consult, when the answer is to stop, not to add. Sometimes a patient is on her 5th or 6th provider. She wants me to correct what was done somewhere else. And the most honest thing I can say to her is nothing more. Not for a while. That is not the answer that she came in for. It's almost never the answer that she wants to hear, but very often it's the right one. 5, anything for someone who can't tell me why she's actually here. If the only answer to why now is I just feel like I should, that is not a reason, that is a habit, and I'm not going to be the one to feed into it. These boundaries aren't about being precious. They're about doing this work for 30 years instead of 3. They're about looking at my patient in the eye in 10 years and not wishing I had said no when I had the chance. Because the work that I am proudest of is not the work that I did. It's the work that I declined. So if one of my girls ever sits across from me one day and asks me about doing something aesthetic, my first answer isn't going to be yes or no. My first answer is going to be why? Why do you feel like you need this? What are you actually hoping it will change? Because confidence and insecurity can look identical from the outside. One woman gets a treatment, feels empowered. Another gets the same exact treatment, hoping that it's finally going to make her feel worthy. Those are not the same experience. I never want the conversation to start with, you need this and this and this. I wanted to start with, tell me what you're thinking. Here's what I'm not willing to pass down. The idea that being a woman is a lifelong battle against yourself, constantly fixing, constantly chasing, constantly adjusting towards a target that keeps moving. That is not empowerment, that is exhaustion. But, and this matters, I also don't want my daughters to feel ashamed for caring about beauty. There's nothing wrong with wanting to look polished, loving your skincare, enjoying makeup, feeling good in the mirror. Beauty can be creative. It can be fun. The goal isn't pretending that appearances don't matter. The goal is making sure that it doesn't become your identity. And there's a difference between enhancing how you look and relying on how you look to define how you feel. So if my daughters ever ask me about treatments, I'm not going to give them a rule. I'm not going to give them a permission slip. I'm going to give them a framework. Am I doing this from a place of confidence or from a place of lack? Am I doing this to fix myself for something that I've taught is wrong? Because they're allowed to enjoy beauty without needing it to feel enough. So before I go further, I want to say something that I don't talk about often, because it's easy to sit down here and sound like I have this all figured out. Like I'm the calm voice from the other side of the mirror who knows better. I don't. I have my own story with this, and I think it would be dishonest not to tell it. So my first treatment wasn't because of a wrinkle. It was because of a photo on Facebook. Someone had taken a picture of me at an event, completely innocent. And when I looked at it later, all I could see was this one thing right there staring at me, the 11 between my brows. The same one that my mother had spent a lifetime smoothing. And in that moment, I understood her. It wasn't vanity. It was inheritance. I booked the appointment 2 days later. And so for a while, I really did feel better lighter, more like myself. But what I didn't expect was what happened after. I started seeing other things that I really had never noticed before. Once I had erased that one thing, other things got louder. And that's the part that nobody wants to warn you about. You don't fix and just feel done. You fix and you feel more aware. It took me a while, and honestly, becoming a mother had everything to do with it, to understand something that should have been obvious. The problem was never my forehead or my brows. The problem was that I had learned somewhere along the way that there was always something to be fixed. And once I saw that pattern in myself, I couldn't unsee it in my patients. Women would sit across from me asking me to soften something, and I could hear it. I could tell who was enhancing and who was running because I had been both. So the part that stays with me, whatever relationship a woman has with herself, she passes down quietly, consistently, over time, not through formal lectures, through language, through I look old, I don't like my skin, I need to lose weight, I look fat, I look terrible in this lighting. They sound like small comments, almost harmless. They're not. Little girls hear all of it, and they don't just hear it, they internalize it. They watch how we react to photos, how we stand in front of mirrors, what and how we criticize, what we try to hide. And slowly that becomes their blueprint, not just for beauty, for how to speak to themselves. One day, your daughter becomes the voice inside her own head, the way that she sees herself, the way that she talks to herself when no one is around. And a lot of that voice is learned. I'll tell you a moment that has stayed with me. My middle daughter, she was probably around 6, came up to me one morning while I was getting ready. She looked at me, looking at myself, and she said, very matter of fact, "Mommy, what are you fixing?" I didn't have an answer because I wasn't fixing anything. I was just standing there, scanning, observing myself, the way that I had watched my mother do, the way that she had watched her mother do. My daughter wasn't asking a question. She was learning a behavior from me, 6 words from a 6-year-old that have changed the way that I stand in front of a mirror more than any treatment ever could. There's a difference between reflection and rejection. Reflection is noticing something about yourself with neutrality. Rejection is attaching emotion to it. Criticism, disappointment. A lot of women were never taught how to separate those two things. So every observation becomes a judgment. Every mirror becomes a critique. Every photo becomes something to fix. And when that becomes the norm, it gets passed down, not intentionally, but consistently. So maybe this conversation isn't just about how we choose or what we choose for ourselves. Maybe it's about the tone that we set. I keep coming back to the woman before me. My grandmother, my mother, my sister, and now me and my daughters. Each generation taught the next how to see themselves, whether they meant to or not. My grandmother lived in a world where beauty was quiet. My mother's generation, more attention to maintenance. Mine, the era that you can actively change, refine, control. And my daughters are growing up in a world where beauty is constant, constantly visible, constantly compared, constantly edited. So I think about what each generation passes down to the next, not the routines, not the products, not the treatments, the perspective, how we talk about ourselves, how we react to our reflection, how we assign value to the way that we look. That's what carries. Becoming a mother made me more aware of it in small moments, looking at a photo, fixing my hair, saying something casual about how I look, and realizing that someone is watching, someone is listening, someone is learning what it means to be a woman for me. That doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean never caring about beauty. It doesn't mean pretending that aesthetics don't exist. The truth is, I get treatments. I care how I look. I'm not standing here pretending I'm above any of this, but I do it a little differently now. Quieter, less reactive, from a place that feels chosen, not chased. It means being aware of the tone, because the goal isn't to teach girls to avoid beauty. The goal is to teach them that beauty can be enjoyed without becoming the measure of their worth. They can look in the mirror and feel something other than critique. And that starts with us in the small moments that don't feel significant, but actually are, because whether we realize it or not, they're listening. They're always listening. I'm Dr. Carol Eisenstadt, and this is the Line Eraser Podcast. Until next time.